I'm going to talk a little bit about a concept that jazz players will sometimes refer to as bitonal triads. It's very useful on the slide guitar because we're usually tuned to some sort of open chord and have several groups of triads that we can play with the bottleneck. So my top 4 strings here are in an open G tuning. Everything else is like standard. It's a tuning that some people call cheater's G. I give credit, my use of it as just being a guitar player that wants to be flexible enough to do both things at once, and also the influence of David Tronzo, who I think uses this tuning quite a bit, if not exclusively. Probably he doesn't do anything exclusively, but so an example would be, say if we have like a G root, we could use B flat major and C major triads over top of that G root to give the sound of a G minor Dorian mode, or a G minor 7 chord, or a G minor 13 chord, however you want to think about all the tone colors there. But some people think it has a gospel-y kind of sound just to the harmony, but you can use this linearly, playing single note lines where you're playing portions of both triads. That kind of thing across the neck, and then you don't have to play it directly, each inversion of the chord, but that's just a sound of that. All over that root note there. But there are other uses for this as well. You could use it just in your accompaniment of someone else's playing. That sort of sound for a G minor chord. Again, you're not thinking of it as C major and B flat. You're thinking of it as a G minor 7 sort of tonality, but you're just playing the triad groups over top of it. It's a common concept, but I just don't hear many slide guitar players talking about it. So you could think of single note lines. For me, technically, this is something where you're playing stuff on the first couple of strings, finding ways to try to reach those chords underneath it. I think of the great guitar player Lenny Breau, who had a real independence of his melodies and chord playing that he did at the same time, much the way a piano player would play, except for he was doing it within the confines of his left hand on the guitar with a great right hand technique to get through that. But so we can explore ways that we can reach this. So if I can play this G note here, I can play this piece of a G minor. It's playing in 6 here. So I would do things and play in that way where I'd find maybe these 2 6 that are like a B flat major and a C major, B flat major, and a C major. Now find different ways to play these in different positions on the neck, and find as many ways I could play those with the same 2 notes up and down the neck. That way I could feel freer to travel with the slide. If that makes sense. So So it requires you working on your behind the slide technique, but a lot of it just comes from being a standard, non-bottleneck player and trying to apply those concepts using the slide. The right hand technique becomes very important because you have to mute so many different things, and there are many videos that could be done talking about the technique that's used there to get the right amount of things ringing out and things dead in there. But again, little exercises like that where you're just trying to keep one note. And you can see a lot of times there I'm not letting things ring, and it's not like saying that note's not going to be in there the whole time. It could be just short punctuations, and then getting to the chord. It's not like, but one of the goals is to be able to keep all those things ringing in there and practice that. But it takes a lot of work, and this is just sort of a demonstration of some of these ideas. So in doing this, you want to learn all these triads up and down the neck in whatever your preferred tuning is. I've told you what mine is earlier. I'll change it around occasionally. But so I'll learn these major triads until I'm back here and try to find ways to finger those with the slide, playing the soprano as much as possible. Oops, excuse me. So that's some bad muting behind the slide through that, but and that's just those two triads back to back all the way up the first pair of strings, and then you would do it on the next pair. And it's not always going to be possible to have the slide playing the soprano, but then when you're making decisions about where to play melody with the bar, those things come into mind. You're like, well, on this group of 3 strings here, it's really hard to keep the slide being the highest thing to play and keep the note in the soprano, so it might not work out so well to use those 3 strings for these kinds of ideas. And after you've gone through this process with all the groups of strings, you start skipping strings and come up with wider voicings for these things. You open up the sound of the triads, which is a different sort of different concept. But there are probably 6 or 7 different really useful combinations of major triads, minor triads, and major and minor triads, mixed triads. And this is just one pair of them that gives you a sort of a Dorian minor sound, or a minor chord with a natural 6. And you can put the notes together and you get what's called a hexatonic scale, if you want to think of them, grouping them all from lowest to highest, and come up with a linear scale, which is fine, but the concept to my ears works better when you're actually playing with the groups of triads, not trying to turn it into a scale, because you end up with 6 notes, just 1 note shy of a full 7-note mode of the major scale. But you're sort of playing around this sound of a minor 13 chord. So you get that minor tonality in your your head. And then you'd mess with that group of notes, the two triads together. So those are just some some ideas that you can mess with to expand your playing, using the tuning to your advantage, but not limiting yourself to playing normal open tuning, 5th fret, 7th fret, 12th fret kind of playing that is involved with a lot of traditional bottleneck blues playing, which I love. This is not a knock against that stuff. It's just, an expansion of things that are possible with the slide guitar and with the bottleneck guitar, if you're interested in expanding it. If you're not, then by all means, continue on with your... That's soft. It's great. All right. Thanks. See you next time.